Hello, everyone. Welcome to Spiritual Care in the Midst of Crisis. My name is Angela Whitenhill Shields, and I'm here with you from the National Benevolent Association, and I am the manager of the Mental Health Initiative. The NBA is your health and social service ministry, and we are delighted to think about what does it mean to really have health and work through social service in the life of the church. And so we partner with congregations, regions, general ministries, and a variety of health and social service providers to create communities of compassion and care. Today we have with us members of our mental health initiative, which is an initiative part of MBA that really thinks about creatively about what mental health and mental wellness means in the life of the church. And so we'll introduce ourselves. I'm the manager of that initiative, and I'll go with my colleague next. Thank you so much.
Hi, everybody. I'm Hector Hernandez. I am the MBA Connect coordinator, and part of my work centers in MBA's mental health initiative, especially connecting that initiative with the Spanish speaking or bilingual speaking sectors of our church. I'm also worked on our peer learning and wellness groups. And again, connecting the aspects of the mental health initiative into peer group working. It's a pleasure for me to be here with all of you today.
And hello, everybody. My name is Sara Serrano, and I am a licensed clinical social worker. And I have been working with Angela and Hector for the past 3 or 4 years. And I am currently doing some leadership in some of the task teams, specifically helping towards this Spanish speaking and bilingual congregations in our Disciples of Christ. I have a private practice. I am a psychotherapist, and I have a private practice called Bienestar, which means well-being in Spanish, counseling and education. I practice out of Florida and Colorado, and I have a focus on helping the helpers. So that is kind of like the focus of my private practice.
Yeah, we are so grateful to have her. She helps us make things, these things make sense. So what we want to do is just start quickly to talk a little bit about what we mean when we say mental health. When we hear the word mental health, we often think of negative associations, but the reality is that mental health is just health. It's our ability to cope with stress and change. It's our ability to bounce back after difficulties and adversity. And it's really kind of the status of good, mental wellness is the status of good health. Our mental health is impacted by risk factors and protective factors. And so you can imagine in this moment and pandemic moment, all the risk factors that have brought on us affect our ability to cope. And we'll talk a little about that as we go forward. But the status of our mental health can be good or poor. And the reality is it's just a part of a holistic approach to health. So when we think about our physical health or our spiritual health, our emotional health, that our mental health is really a part of that. And so you'll hear that throughout our time together. And we want you to keep that in our minds when we talk about what does it mean to be well in our mental health status.
Something that is important for us to consider, and I think the essence of what we want to share with you today is when we are in the middle of a disaster, the different stages, the reality itself of being, trying to navigate, I prefer to say, during and through a disaster. A clear definition, very basic definition is disaster at its most basic level is an event that severely disturbs the everyday lives of individual and communities. And, you know, because we are going through a pandemic, we know how truthful is that. And I think it's important for us to understand the stages or the different stages of a disaster. When we get the impact, when we deal with this that takes away our normalcy, the immediate response is what is called that heroism stage, the euphoria stage, in which the individuals, the institutions, the communities, you know, step up to the plate to the plate and respond, react. Another way to see that relief stage is like the honeymoon. We see a cohesion in which communities, almost reimagine itself. We get funds, people share what they have, and it's when you see the image that you're seeing, it's almost like the top of the mountain. But because disasters, the length of the disaster varies, depends on the actual disaster. If we think about what we're living as a nation right now, because of the length, all that euphoria, all that immediate response, it's almost like the gas run, we run out of gas, and then it takes us to the disillusionment, that time in which despair or hopelessness or helplessness can come and take control over all of us. And in a lot of different aspects, I think that as a nation we're living in this moment right now, because of what we are living. It's not just one disaster, it's a multiple disasters. And that's the stage of a disaster that takes the longest. um, it takes time, and it's constant, it's not linear. And eventually, like any other disaster, it will come to an end. But if you see the image, is a treacherous path. Is grief is there, trying to deal with the loss of what was, and trying to figure out what will be the new norm, until eventually, and we don't know the time it will take. Like I said, it will allow us to go to a new norm. So, and very briefly, those are some of the stages of the basic stages of a disaster.
Mm. Thank you.
It's worth noting, Hector, that it looks like a linear process, but it's not a linear process. You can actually go back and forth between things. You can have, more moments of euphoria and heroic stage, and then go fall into multiple moments of disillusionment, and come back out. So, and the main takeaway from this is that we're all in this. And that everybody reacts to disasters. There's in some shape or form. Nobody is exempt from having a reaction. And since we're talking about this holistic view, and holistic is nothing else other than the fact that it's not just one component to us and one aspect of us that reacts to things. They're all interdependent and linked together. When we talk about our emotional health, our cognitive, which is our thought processing, social relational aspect, physical aspect, and we can even in all of this weave the spiritual aspect of it, obviously. But we're all going to have different types of reactions to disasters, and they can be natural or man-made, but to crisis situations, we could call them too, where in emotional you might experience shock and fear and anger. You might experience sadness, right? Some people, just experience an increase in just very moments of a lot of worry, feelings that can be numb, where you just don't even know how to feel, or you just don't feel anything for short periods of time. And in the cognitive aspect, some things to look out for and to be cognizant of is that sometimes it's hard to focus. It's hard to make decisions, right? You feel like there's just so many variables, and it's just so hard to make a decision, to concentrate. Sometimes it's remembering. Sometimes it's this indecisiveness, confusion. You feel like you're not capable of dealing with the situation, like maybe your sense of confidence may be lowered because you feel like I've been able to deal with other stuff, but this just hit me so hard. So all these thoughts that come in with a cognitive side of it. Then we have this interpersonal issues also, that we're all social distancing, and it should have been called from the beginning physical distancing. because there's no reason to be socially distancing from
Mhm.
people at this time. We have all kinds of connections, but yeah, sometimes we go into our shell and we keep people out. That's a defense mechanism that many people have. Some people need it to kind of gather their thoughts, and some other people use it as a maladaptive coping skill, where they just isolate completely. But certainly the imposed isolation that we're on in right now, it's not helping any. And all of these things manifest themselves physically also, and we also have to be aware of it. You know, we can have gastrointestinal issues because of the increased anxiety, increased vulnerability in our systems to develop ulcers. You know, some people, you know, it's the acid reflux. I mean, it's all stress, the headaches, feeling that mental fugue, like you're in a cloud or in a fog, um, even eyesight. All right, even when you feel like you can't see things correctly, or you know, diminished way of being able to look at things for long term, those are all side effects of tension. You might have a tension in your body. So all of these are ways that our bodies react to disasters. And the main key takeaway, the word that you want to kind of, and we want to emphasize also, is this general feeling of being overwhelmed. Okay. And if you have ever been overwhelmed in the past, you know that it is an emotional, cognitive, definitely, your thoughts are overwhelmed. You even feel physically overwhelmed, like you can't bear the burden. And you even might feel overwhelmed by the needs of the people around you on top of your own needs. So that key takeaway in this is that the feeling of overwhelmed, if we're getting to that point where we are overwhelmed, or if we're already there, then what we want to work towards is reducing, going back and mitigating that, so that we are not in that state of feeling overwhelmed all the time.
Mhm. Thank you for that. And so with knowing the stages of where we are, how they move in cyclical, with knowing the effects that it could have, and so many of us have probably experienced these already, we wanted to normalize that this is new, that this is something we've never seen before. And so none of us can do it. None of us have done it well, but we're working to do it well. So take that pressure off of us to do it well. With that said, how do we lead well? How do we actually lead well? The next couple slides will show you are going to be different tips and strategies to do that, starting with slowing down, which sounds counterintuitive to what you might feel or want to do in crisis. But the reality is, to slow down, one of the main strategies we help people is to rest our brains. During crisis, our brain is already in overdrive, like you heard and seen in our what we're experiencing. We're working to mediate and process all the conscious emotions that we have, but also all the unconscious emotions that we have that we don't even know is there. The brain is actually pushing it down to mediate for us. And so because of that, it's really important to slow down, to just rest it, which could be music, natural sounds, quiet space, any moments where we're not problem solving, performing, or being on, if that makes sense, are really important for us when we slow down.
Absolutely. Evaluating yourself constantly. You know, we're always in a process of assessing where we are at, how we're dealing with things. And believe it or not, what worked for you last month might not be working this month.
Right.
And that's okay. That's okay. It worked for you last month. And, you know, if it kept your head above water, and if it kept you from feeling and getting to a place of being overwhelmed, then perfect. But things have, and if you've noticed, things have changed so quickly, from even sometimes day to day and week to week. Information is different. Different other situations have come up on top of the pandemic situation. And so we want to constantly be evaluating our reactions and what we're doing to take care of ourselves. So if, you know, sometimes it takes even penciling it in, you know, that I'm going to, you know, today, because it just, we get so overwhelmed with different things, and our agendas get filled pretty quickly. But to have a space, you know, even if it's on a weekly basis, to evaluate, okay, where am I? How am I doing? Do I need to do anything differently this week? And being flexible in that way is going to get you a long way.
The other thing that we are inviting all of you is to use what is part of who we are as a church, and to embrace prayer as process, or as an opportunity to process your feelings, process what is happening in your body, what is happening on your mind, and to take that time, that opportunity um, in creating meaning. Um, and, you know, I don't know how many of you have heard the terminology of mindful, and is to be in a process in which you really take time and process with your mind. As the church, we do that with our soul, with our wholeness. So if we embrace prayer and we take our time, if you take your time and that moment of prayer, you take time to analyze and to assess what's going on inside, and at the same time to present that to God, you know, it is a solid way to build up resiliency, and it's something that is part of who we are already.
Amen to that. With that, hopefully through our prayer times, we start really being aware of our body and ourselves. And it takes us to this moment of knowing and asking, okay, what do we do? You know, what do we do? Mm-hmm. One of the things that I would say we do is we simplify and we ration our energy. Thinking about what is essential in this time. And so, Sarah, can you tell us about what does that look like with our new space?
Yeah. You know, one of the things that I've noticed is that we are doing, many of us, right? So even if we're talking, you know, secular occupational duties, even that we're talking about family, our family duties and responsibilities and our role, if we're talking about ministerial duties also, we're doing the same things. Okay, we're doing the same thing. We're taking care of our families. Where if you're working, I'm a therapist. I'm still doing therapy. You know, the clergy is still talking to the individuals who are sick, who are going through the different situations. They're still preparing their sermons. We are doing the same work, but it's the different modality. It's a different modality. And that's the part that can be very frustrating. That's the part that can be very frustrating because it has taken a different skill set in many areas, especially those who have struggled with technology recently and struggle with all these meetings online and everything. But what we want to emphasize is that if we look at, you know, the bare bones of things and we think about, am I still being able to feel like I am fulfilling my role in different areas of life, and I'm doing it, and I'm doing the best that I can under the circumstances, to get to a place of acceptance. And that's where, you know, mindfulness comes in there too, where, you know, you can get to this place of acceptance that it's different, but it's okay, that I can learn new skill sets to be able to carry out this important work that I'm called to do, and to be able to just, you know, embrace that this is a season. Okay, and all seasons have an end. We don't know how long the season ends, but all seasons have an end, and that we can just embrace it as long as we are fulfilling our duties and getting the work that we need to get done, and we can be okay with that.
Amen to that. What does it mean? To piggyback off that, the work that needs to get done, I'm here to say our humans are beautifully limited, but the work that needs to get done is going to also be essential. It's going to also be limited and cut down. And that's, I think, a good thing. In the mental health world, we talk a lot about balance and health, and that comes from these parts of our body saying, hey, we're at capacity. So with that said, I want us to think about that we were meant to live in community. We're meant to be reliant on God and one another. And so a lot of us struggle with accepting limits in general because our culture says we should be all powerful and all knowing. But it's so important that you move with the rhythm of your limits in crisis and use them really as a guide for our productivity, a guide for, what activities do we do, using those, our limits to know where should we put our energy, where should we put our creativity and productivity. It's where does it count the most? And so this idea of even thinking about our work or thinking about who we are and our role, kind of going in knowing that it's time to cut off the fat in so many ways. All of our the luxury of having systems in place that are supportive of our life are gone, and it's okay that the work tied to those are also gone. That we kind of go down to a few bars of, if you think about, of connectivity in this time, and that we are really embracing what it means to be limited, and that just it's okay, and it's a beautiful thing to know our limits. Hopefully when things are back up and running, we continue to embrace our limits, and this is a major lesson around, hey, I don't have to do it all. That's not what I'm intended or supposed to do in the long run.
Um, And I think it's very important that we understand that change always bring gains and losses.
Hmm.
And that duality is part of our reality. You cannot have with the other. Um, when we were discussing this workshop, we were talking about the reality now in the time that we're living on our identity. We have ourself have different parts. We if we go to work, you have a side of you that relates with your coworker and a support system, and you are that part of yourself in that realm, in that reality. And then in church, and then in home, and in school, and suddenly all that parts of your true self are smashed like smashed potato together, all together. And part of what we have been dealing and probably will continue dealing with is who I am in the midst of this.
Yeah.
Who I am when I have to work, eat, find some kind of balance, deal with family drama, pets, etc., in the same place. And it's like I don't have any opportunity to, I don't know, to disconnect.
Hmm.
So it is what it is. Again, every change has bring gains and losses, and we can concentrate. And sometimes I'm an expert doing that in our losses. But then this is a great new opportunity to reimagine,
Hmm.
to redesign, to experiment. And yeah, there are gonna be parts of yourself that are lost in this process, and hopefully you will be able to reclaim those parts, and
Hmm.
then you will be able to create new parts, to
Hmm.
create new things, um, to mix instead of having those physically separations, to because you are all these parts are together, to mix and mesh until you find balance, and you find something that allows you to maybe to be the best version of you in the midst of what we're living.
Sure. No, I just love that because I think it's perfect segue into this idea of what it means to work together. So much of our identities, unfortunately, we were raised to kind of have to do it all ourselves and have our identity so connected to an individualistic identity. But it feels like in so many beautiful ways, it seems like the spirit is calling us in a lot of ways to really be together and connect. What does it mean to really healthily be together? Hearing all what we all need in one space. And so I want to really sit with thinking about in a relationship to our identities, in relationship to how we slow down our brains, in relation to how we actually do this well. How do we work smarter and not harder? How do we actually work together in a way that is just, that is equitable, that is effective, right? That gives us all some time to just breathe, but also gets the work done, the essential work done that we need to do in this time.
Hmm. So one of the most important and best resources that we have is each other.
Mm.
We can't forget that. And I think that, with this, again, going back to that word of social distancing, it's almost like, we lose sight of the fact that we still have each other. And it's just in a different way, but we still have each other. And so, one of the things that, we want to encourage is, use your leaders. And we're talking, specifically to the, in the ministry sense, in the church wise, in the work, use your leaders to help out, to do the things that they used to do also in the within the church. A lot of the leaders had their niche, had their place. And with this whole pandemic, sometimes because we're not meeting physically in the spaces that we used to meet, it's so easy to then take a lot of more stuff on ourselves that we had delegated before. But many of those tasks can still be done by the leaders who had those tasks to begin with in the first place. So, it's that work smarter, not harder. Use the resources around you, on a more personal basis. We're all trying, and I think many of us has been doing a good job in thinking outside the box. in using the resources, the people that we have around us. I have personally been seeing this as the school year gets closer and closer to us. And so many parents just don't know what's going to happen. I've seen just the banding together of parents in terms of, if we're going to keep our kids home, we need to support each other. Who's teaching this? Who's teaching this other stuff? That's the type of thinking we need to have. That there are people that have very big talents in areas where we don't have that much of a talent, right? We're good at some stuff, some other stuff we need to delegate. And the big takeaway is that we don't have to do it all ourselves.
Right.
We don't. And there are people that are willing to, barter, if you do this, then can I do this for you? And that's beautiful and it's perfect.
Do you mind if I add one little thing to that?
Yeah.
What our churches, for those of us in social service agencies, using our volunteers. And one thing we think about, not everyone is at home with pets and kids, and some of us are actually home by ourselves, right? And we have so much more time, but really miss social engagement. And so those of us who, whether we do have who is in our house, there are a lot of people who still are looking for something to do, looking for some way to be connected. And what does it mean to utilize for our agencies, people out there who want to problem solve for you and with you in this time. So I just want to add a little piece on there. I love what you said, Sarah, about that.
And again, it's part of reimagining, it's part of redesigning. We all reacted immediately in that heroic phase, and we realize this is longer. So this is the perfect time to redesign. This is the perfect time to assess the role of the leaders, for example, the church leaders, and this is the perfect time to train, to spread the weight of the leadership. I have a few examples that I want to share. I have a good friend from the Puerto Rican Disciples of Christ Church, Reverend Jose Matos. And since the beginning of the pandemic, he joined 3 other pastors from the Sonadora, Dorado, Puerto Nuevo, and Central churches. And they have been doing Sunday services together since the beginning of the pandemic. The 4 pastors join together every Sunday. They share the preaching, they share the different resources, and these 4 churches have one service in which they all participate. And I think that's amazing because they are sharing who they are, and they're able to support each other as leaders. I have a good friend, Reverend Bergil Soto, who has been very intentional into inviting people to preach every so often, because the weight on her shoulders, because she's a pastor of an immigrant congregation, the weight has double or triple, and she realizes it's taking a toll on her. So she has been very intentional into communicating with the elders, the board, and say, I need time off, and inviting some other pastors as pulpit supply. So again, if we take an opportunity to work smarter, and we take an opportunity to assess what do we have and how can we use it in a different way, it will help us withstand the longest. I mean, this is a long journey, and we still are not dealing with the second wave,
Right.
And we have to do our best, and be able to offer support to each other.
And so with that, just thinking more and more about what does it mean to really plan for the moment? We heard it's a long journey, and it's a journey that's going to transform what we knew into something different. So we won't come back to what we knew. And so it's like, how do we actually just stay present in this moment? I think of the scripture, don't worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow worry for itself. And I've learned that so strong that, this day, just think about this day, and I will have my daily bread to get through it. And so I want us to think a lot about one of the ways that I do that personally, and I think it's important for all of us, is this idea of being gentle to our brains when we are engaging unknowns. I would say it is mental abuse to try to account for all the possibilities that await and try to figure them all out to be prepared for them. That is something that is a practice I know a lot of us do in normal time. That, that could be, even doable. It is not doable now. This is extremely overwhelming, just talking about it, because all the factors and scenarios will change. We saw this summer the extreme kind of consciousness about racism in the country, but a whole other element to pandemic for me personally, but for so many people. And so I wouldn't have even thought that would happen. Who knows what will come next? And we also think the worst. So when we do that pre-planning, we're constantly anticipating what my friend and counselor told me, life without the spirit. You're always thinking about what's happening, and you don't, think about the possibility of the spirit coming in and mediating that. And so I think about the fall and I'm like, oh, the numbers, but I have no idea what God might do to mediate that. And that's not a part of my pre-planning. So all that to say, it's a really healthy practice to plan for the moment, just that daily bread, and knowing that God will give manna for the next day when it's time to think about those scenarios.
Right. And that gentleness, we talked about the effects of disasters on our cognitive, functioning, so if we are, having a difficult time concentrating, if we have a shortened attention span, if we have just so many things to consider, without knowing all the variables, right? Because I think that's what's happening. Then we can't expect our brains to work in the same way. We can't. So we have to find ways of working around that. And, one of the best ways to work around some of these things is this planning, but in short chunks. Okay. Since we have limited attention spans now, it's difficult concentrating, then, don't overwhelm yourself by planning out a month when you don't even know what tomorrow's going to bring, right? So I am not a big advocate of planning each day. I think people need to plan at least 2-3 days in advance, because I think one day is limited. But if you need to plan just on a day-by-day basis, then by all means, go ahead. The point is, you have to know yourself. You have to know what works best for you today. And we go back, what worked for me this week might not work for me next week, because I don't know what's coming around the corner. But it's the ability to plan while at the same time being flexible, while at the same time having that ability to kind of roll with the fact that something might change. Okay. So shorter timelines, planning in chunks, maybe at most a week in advance, and planning with the mentality that if something may change, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. And just, having the priorities and those essential things out of my whole day. All right. This is all I have to do. But out of all that list, these are the super essentials. This is what must be done. The rest can either be rolled on to the next day, or even better, delegated to other people. So, using your ability to just say, hey, I can do this, but so can that person. And they can be blessed by being involved in the work. But shorter timelines, planning in chunks, things that you can check off, those can help to bring us to a place where we feel like we have a little bit more control over the things that we can have control over. And that's important, to not feel to that point where you're totally out of control.
Do you mind one little piece of that? Sorry, I know.
Yeah.
But I know that when it comes to like mental wellness, and we think about our thinking, sometimes if it's black or white or kind of really rigid, it could affect us in negative ways. In this moment, hope is so important as a coping skill. But sometimes if we plan, say 6 weeks in advance, we put a lot of hope into that, which is normal. And it's something we look forward to, and we're waiting on it. And if that doesn't happen, it actually exacerbates the devastation. Whereas if I just did 2 weeks in advance, that length of time for it to happen or not. And so just thinking about how hope and looking forward to something is going to be it's going to be that much more important, and to not necessarily set ourselves up to really need something too far in advance. It's something you made me think about that we want to leverage that part of our coping.
Studies says that it takes 66 days for us to really create new habits, to begin to do something new until it becomes part of our reality, our true self. So this could be, again, a good time. We keep talking about reimagining and redesigning, a good time for us to create new rituals, to develop new activities that can help us aim for balance, can help us on our resiliency, can feed our soul. And we're going to be talking about that later on. Um, so again, it's a matter of doing, for example, in taking the time that in the past took you to drive to your work, to your workplace. Maybe that time you can create a new ritual. I can talk. My wife, one of the things that she does now is she will get her cup of tea or coffee, uh, and she will sit down and enjoy the garden with the birdhouse with the feeders and the birds, and that's her time to begin the day, and it takes the time that she decided, and it's her new ritual. um, so this is the time, and I will invite you to explore, to experiment. The other thing is there are activities, and we will talk a little bit more about that, that can and will help you create resiliency. Activities that basically allowed your parasympathetic nervous system to bring almost balance and yeah, bring balance to your whole body instead of being reacting. And we have, even in the midst of difficult, especially if you're a leader and you're dealing not just with your own challenges but challenges of your congregation, we need to create times and to create rituals in which we enjoy and we savor um, the moments, the victories, the happiness, the joy, and we're going to be talking a little bit more about that. And we have to be intentional. That is not going to happen if we are not intentional, and we kind of like weave that into our daily routines until they become habits.
Yeah. Yes. And so just as we're getting closer to our time in, we have a few more thoughts to offer to you. One being one that seems obvious, but is very hard to do, is taking care of our bodies. Right now, our health is our wealth. Our health is everything. It is so important to maintain our health physically, as well as mentally and emotionally. And so let's think a little about, what does it mean to listen to our bodies?
Yeah. There's a great book out there. It's called The Body Keeps the Score. If, there's many people who've read it. And it's focusing on trauma, the focus of the book is on trauma. But the big takeaway is that everything that goes on inside of us is expressed in our physical body.
Mm-hmm.
And that is just very true. So listening to, what we need, and, the key component to that is, um, to be able to hear it before it is screaming at us. All right, to be able to hear those whispers of, I need to rest, I need to take time off, I need to take a mental health day, I need to call into work and say, hey, I'm taking the morning off, or I'm before it gets to the point of you're doing it because you're already overwhelmed. We go back to that word. We want to be preemptive, right? We want to institute, like Hector was talking about, these intentional rituals and activities or coping skills that we are doing because we want to avoid getting to that place of feeling overwhelmed. It is so much easier to avoid and prevent than to intervene when you're already at that place of feeling overwhelmed, in crisis, in burnout stage. It is much more easier to intervene before, and there's many things that we can do. And so what we want to do is listen to our body. Eat when you're hungry, rest and sleep when you're sleepy, not when, oh, but I have to finish this. Okay, remember about, whatever can be delegated to the next day. It's fine. It's fine. You can do that. It's hard for us to do that, right? But sometimes we have to, in these moments of crisis, take extra precautions. But be extra careful, do extra self-care, because we have to be, in tune with our bodies. When we're tired, take a rest. When we're too restless, I don't know if it happens to you, but you're sitting too long and your legs are already jumping all over the place. You can't see. That's time for you to take a walk. It's time for you to leave your desk for 10 minutes, go take a walk, have a snack, have a healthy snack, drink water, drink lots and lots of water. We have to listen to our bodies. Our bodies are always going to be sending us messages about what we need. But we can be very good at ignoring those things. The more we ignore them, we're getting into dangerous places. So cultivate an ear to hear your physical body telling you, this is what I need right now, and be able to be attentive to that and to do something about it.
Again, you have to go through a process of discover what makes sense to you. You are the one who has to find healthy um, coping skills that can help you withstand and sustain you. Um, Part of that is, as we create new rituals, we create new rituals that becomes coping skill. An example, I heard this, that instead of watching the news before you go to sleep, this psychotherapist decided to, instead of going to bed with an actual electronic like an iPad or a telephone, she will go with a book and she will read instead of having the temptation of looking and getting all that information that might not allow her to sleep or might not allow us to sleep. So you have to regulate the intake of news. I will invite you to find responsible news sources and to do it in specific time of the day, in short amount of time, because if not, that is supposed to brings you clarity will take away your peace. Exercise, eat well, sleep. We have talked about that, but you have to figure out if the gym is closed and the gym was a way for you to aim for balance, then maybe this is a time, I don't know, to ride a bicycle, to do something different and experiment until that becomes your life-saving resiliency mechanism. Hobbies, this is a great time for you to seek out what fits your soul, what fits your inner self, and experiment. I can tell you two examples. My wife with gardening, that has helped her find balance and is feeding her. And in my case, art, I have been intentional into exploring and developing new ways that can sustain me.
Definitely. Just all this, I know I'll add one thing, is just using our senses. Those are the senses that are overused and overstimulated, that we rest them, and the senses that we're not engaging, like smell. I say call your friend, don't Zoom them sometimes because your eyes are overworked. But really just knowing that putting on sounds and smells and sitting and closing your eyes and touching your arm or rolling in the grass if you can, or having these other essential experiences outside of just staring at screens and sitting all day are really important, as well as movement. We're really mostly on screens. So what does it mean to have 2 hours or 3 hours of no screen time, right? Looking out a window, opening your door, just talking to yourself or the people in the space with you, but really not having any screens going. We can go to the next slide. And the role of grace. We're going to wrap up our tips with such a huge spiritual concept. It's the foundation of our faith as Christians. How does grace actually bring us through this moment? What does it mean to give ourselves grace in a time like this?
Everything that we have shared, grace has to be part of that. We have to be graceful through others. We have to be graceful to our true selves. It's okay to feel crappy once in a while. It's okay that we have plans or hopes or that we took a risk and experiment and that it didn't work out. Then grace comes, and then you try again. I learned a long time ago, and it was my wife who told me that, you're always showing grace to others, but rarely you offer grace to yourself. So I will invite you to everything that you do, every experimentation, every process, that see it through the lenses of grace and to show mercy, to show compassion. And that will allow you to keep walking and experimenting.
Part of that grace, showing grace to yourself, that happens to many of us, especially if we are in roles of being helpers. It is very common that we are constantly serving, and that, we have a harder time accepting the help of others, receiving help from others. One of the first things I do with somebody who's very depressed because depression, it gives people tunnel vision sometimes, and it's just so inwardly focused, is I ask them to find a way to serve somebody else. It's a great way to get out of yourself. It's a blessing. It's a blessing. We feel the blessing when we're serving other people. And a lot of times, then what happens is that when we don't let other people serve us, we're taking that blessing from them. So if we are talking about grace, a great way to show ourselves grace is to allow people around us to bless us, to minister to us, and to serve us. We have to. There's people who are really longing to serve their leaders. There's people praying for you. There's people who want to make meals for you. There's people who really want to be there to lift up your arms, during these moments of crisis. And so let them. Let them make it a goal to say, I'm going to let people serve me and minister to me today.
Mm-hmm. And just, oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. No, it's your turn, right?
Sorry. Just quickly, that different doesn't mean bad. We were talking about this earlier. And Sarah actually reminded us that this is going to be different. We're in a time where the game has changed, the rules have changed. Right. And I don't say we're meant to fail, but we're not meant to know what to do. This is not the point. We're meant to, like you said, work together and figure it out together. And so if our birthdays are different, if our Advent seasons are different, if Lent is different, if celebrating our ceremonies, my child is now, he's going to be a year old. His first year has been COVID. And so I had to kind of grieve what I thought I was supposed to be, but we've done some really cool, different things. That doesn't mean it's bad. It doesn't mean I lost something. We think about, if you spend this time grieving or only thinking on what we're not getting or what we're losing, that's also a form of mental abuse. We want to stop, and I'll jump to mine, is we want to think about what we are receiving, celebrate what we have accomplished without knowing, celebrating all the unique creativity we've done with ceremonies of past and the new kind of rituals that we've created. And we're going to grieve what we've lost, but making sure we have mental space to do both at the same time.
Yep.
And then if you take the opportunity, like I have said a few times already, it's like it gives the opportunity of having a wide canvas, an open canvas in front of us. And if you concentrate into feeding your soul and cultivating joy, that difference could allow you to, we'll give an example. Part of the work I do with the peer learning and wellness groups is that we meet at least twice a year physically, once or twice a year physically. And one of the things we do is play. Well, we began a new group of Latina pastors, and we were unable to do that. So, yeah, that was a big loss. But we took a virtual cooking class recently, and that was a lot of joy. And we connected, and we support each other, and that fed our souls. So we have to embrace God's creativity, and we have to be intentions into cultivating joy. I have a friend who dances one song once a day. I have people who have enjoyed different things and have incorporated humor, have incorporated conversations with friends in a way that they are cultivating joy, and that brings fruit, that feeds the soul, and that allows us to be a better version of ourselves, and also to allow us to continue our work and give us resiliency.
Amen.
Absolutely.
And so just thinking about who we are, we want to wrap up with some really practical resources that will help us think about this time and how do we continue these kind of conversations with professionals, with friends. And so we'll start with Sarah, if you would just kind of bring us in.
Sure. So, in the same, vein of what we've been talking about, it's, the same services, different modalities. There are still resources out there. There's still help out there. We've obviously, the big emphasis with the mental health task force is mental well-being, mental health care, and that involves therapy, counseling, that involves, any type of group support. All of that is still happening. Okay, it is still happening. Everybody has jumped onto the telehealth bandwagon. Welcome, everybody. I've been doing telehealth for years before the pandemic, but everybody has jumped on now. Their studies are continue and have shown that there is no difference in effectiveness in terms of any type of interventions when done in person as opposed to in telehealth. Okay, it is all about obviously the preference of the person, but at this point, many people just don't have a choice at all. And so counseling is still going on. Telehealth, you can call your insurance company. The majority of the big insurance companies have waived their co-payments. Have those that did not have telehealth options have included the telehealth options under the emergency the emergency statutes that have been adopted in most of the states. Okay, so you can look up, you can call your insurance company and say, what are my options for any type of group or counseling that is through telehealth? So there's sliding scale fees. There are still many people donating and doing pro bono services, and we will have some of those resources available to you on the NBA website. You can do online searches, but the big takeaways here is that you have access to care if you have a device, an electronic device. It's a smartphone. If you have an internet connection, there's many hotspots that are being made available too during the pandemic. You can connect and you can have access to care, and it actually helps increase adherence to treatment, where you don't have to worry about the traffic going after work to your therapy session, or the kids at home. You can just put something to play with and you can have your session. It's just there again, we want to just reiterate the fact that the services are still available. They're not being limited at all.
Amen. Thank you for that. Just with that said, we want to just close by just naming that many of us come from a surviving people, right? We cope. We've done this before. We've been through things before, and all of us have access to our spiritual coping that lead us to these practical skills, right? Getting telehealth services, talking to professionals. That this is the time to try those new things, knowing that God is walking with us in the newness of our time. And so we thank you for being with us today. For many of you, we'll have space for question and answers. But like Sarah said, we'll have resources up in our crisis area so you can get more detail. But if anything you took from today, that you slow down, that you be gentle to yourself, that you work with others, that you plan for the moment, and that you really receive grace in a whole nother way. And so with that said, be well, and we'll see you next time.
Dios le bendiga.